Hey, sports fans. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Caderna Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Caderna, and today we have a very special guest on the show, none other than Marques Ogden. For some of you football fans out there, that name might ring a bell. Marques is the younger brother to Jonathan Ogden, one of the greatest offensive linemen in NFL history and current Hall of Famer. Marques was also a very good football player in his own right. In 2003, he was drafted to the NFL as an offensive lineman, following in his brother's footsteps, and had a very successful career in football. However, at the ripe old age of 27, he decided to retire and take up an even more lucrative career in construction and developing. He created a company called Caden Premier Enterprises. The company had very fast growth, took off, and then unfortunately after about 6 years, Marques ended up declaring bankruptcy. He lost almost $2 million in one deal in just a matter of about 90 days. Since that time, Marques has gone on to write two excellent books, which we'll discuss today, has become a successful keynote speaker to both the NFL and many Fortune 500 companies. So in keeping with the theme for the Caderna podcast of personal finance, business knowledge, and self-help, I think we wrap up all three of those very well in this unique individual. So please stay tuned. Not only is it inspiring, entertaining, enlightening, this is something that I think you're going to want to share with your friends. And for any parent out there, I think can certainly be helpful as you're raising kids and trying to get them to the next level, whether it be sports, academics, and so forth. So with no further ado, please welcome our guest, Marques Ogden. So Marques, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Brian? Thanks for having me on.
Good. Yeah, very happy to have you here today. So the first thing I got to ask, it was funny when we first started talking and I pulled you up, I noticed you were listed in the NFL at 6'6", 312, and then your brother Jonathan was listed at 6'9", 345. And I was like, what were you guys eating as kids?
You know, Brian, we were raised by a single father, so everything that wasn't nailed down, we were eating. You know, this was back in the mid to late 80s, and my dad had about a $200 a week food bill in the house. So everything we could get our hands on that wasn't nailed down, we were definitely eating on throughout our childhood.
I can imagine. It shows. That's awesome. And did you guys, I guess you were pretty big kids, did you know from the outset that, you wanted to play sports and maybe someday go pro?
You know, Brian, it was interesting. My brother was 6'9" in the 8th grade. So we kind of knew from him right out of the break where it was going to be. I was 6'3" when I left high school, and I got to 6'6". I grew 3 inches between my last year of high school and my first year of college. And I went to Howard, so I was really not looking to be an NFL player. I mean, this wasn't my, wasn't looking to do that. I mean, I would have been nice, but I was more trying to become an investment banker. So for me, football became very obvious I could potentially do it as a career right before my last year of college when scouts started coming out and looking at me and watching me in practice and in my games. And then that's when my brother Jonathan said, hey, man, you're on some draft boards here, so you need to get serious and give it your all for 1 year and see what happens.
Wow, so it sounds like the NFL, that kind of came as like a surprise to you?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, after high school, I had one offer to college for Howard, amazing. But, Brian, it wasn't like I had a whole bunch of offers like my brother or other things like that. So for me, it was not really like, hey, you're going to be this great football player. It kind of just evolved for me right after, like I said, my last year, well, right before my senior year, after my junior year, it became obvious I had the talent to do so if I worked hard.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. And then when you were at Howard, you said you were majoring in finance?
Correct.
What pushed you to pursue that major?
My father was an investment. My father worked in a company called the Federal Home Loans Bank up New York in their D.C. office. So he was working like in their stocks and bonds rooms. He was like one of their managers. So I learned a lot about that from him. So he was an economics major in college, and he also went to Howard. So that for me really got me saying, hey, I want to do this. Hey, I want to pursue finance, and I got a job working at Merrill Lynch in college as an intern, and I liked it. And that's kind of what I saw myself doing after I left college.
Gotcha. And then the NFL came knocking, and I guess the rest was history from there.
For football, yeah, I was
Yeah,
came knocking. I had a chance to go to the Hula Bowl and play against some great talent from schools like Florida State, Texas, Rice, Miami. My head coach was actually the current head coach of North Carolina Chapel Hill, Matt Brown, who at the
yeah.
time was the head coach of Texas. So, I really had a chance to be around some great athletes, test my skills. I had a really good showing in the Hula Bowl, and that really helped propel me to becoming drafted coming out of college.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. So that's kind of a unique story. So like, I mean, your brother obviously, it sounds like he was kind of like the hot shot that everybody knew was going to make it, but then you kind of took like a different path through high school and not as noticeable until that last year at college.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. And for me, I tell people all the time that you just because you start somewhere doesn't mean you can't go somewhere else. And that was really my football journey. I started in high school, played, I didn't go to varsity until I was a junior. My brother was on varsity as a freshman, all this type of stuff. I
Wow.
didn't go D1. I went 1AA. But still, I ended up in the National Football League and had a nice career, made lots of great friends. And this is why I tell kids all the time, just because you're not having the best, career right now doesn't mean you can't blossom later on if you're willing to work and do the best you can to actually give effort and get better.
Sure. No, I like that. That's very well said. And then when you went to the NFL, you had 5 years there. It sounds like you bounced around a little bit. So, I mean, were you kind of like what they call like a journeyman in the NFL, going from team to team, or what was that like?
So really what happened to me is that playing in the NFL, it's like every time I was on a team, my coach would get fired. Or like I was in
Oh man.
Jacksonville, and then we had a switch of coaches. And I got to Baltimore, had a really good I was doing really good there at Baltimore, no issues. And then my old line coach wanted to get the OC job, and they told him no, so he leaves. And they brought in another guy who actually is Coach Furster, who was the guy that got caught down in Miami with everything going on with him, like all the drugs and stuff like that. He was my line coach in Baltimore, and nice guy, and I didn't have a problem with him, but him and my brother sometimes didn't see eye to eye, so that didn't work out for me. And I went to Buffalo, and things were great. I mean, everything was phenomenal. Malarkey loved me, and Tom Donahoe. But what happened? They get fired. Donahoe gets
Jeez.
fired. Malarkey gets fired, and everything. So in the NFL, I took it all the time. I was a very good player, but when a lot of times when you're on a team and coaches kind of get replaced, that's what the teams do. Unless you're like a star, unless like the quarterback, something like that. Linemen, guys who are good, but sometimes there's not going to be what the coach might want, or try to go a
Yeah.
different direction. They did that. So that's what happened to me in my career. So I mean, I'm very honest about it, and I tell people all the time, like, hey, it's the same thing you have to do sometimes, in a job situation. Like you could be somewhere, and the next thing you know, your boss gets fired. You have to be prepared and adjust and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's why I do a lot of talking all the time about transition. Transition is not easy. You just have to learn how to deal with it. So that was some things where I had, I was young. I didn't understand how to really, have those
Yeah, that's tough.
conversations. Yeah, it
That's
is. I mean,
that's
I'm
interesting
yeah,
that
I mean,
like
it's
even
tough.
you think the NFL like such a huge organization at the pinnacle that even then it sounds like politics could even play a little bit of a role there from team to team.
Sure, yeah, politics is in everything in life. Everything from corporate America to sports to everything that you do. So the way you have to position yourself is you have to understand that even if things happen in politics, just do the best you can to be prepared to transition if times are necessary.
I think we've all been there. We've all felt that to some extent. And so now, when you went to the NFL, I don't know a ton about what it was like growing up for you, but obviously now you're kind of exposed to, like I said, just an elite organization where everybody's very well paid. What was that like going from, I guess, just a normal college kid to now all of a sudden, you're making awesome money and kind of in the limelight here in the NFL? Like, how did you handle that transition?
For me, Brian, it was not too difficult because my brother had gone through it. So I was able to speak with him, and I was able to actually be on the same team with him during my career. And I learned about how to be a professional and how to always work hard and be dedicated and how to save money. So that was good for me. I did see a lot of guys who I played with, who I was friends with, who didn't have that same education, and they would struggle with finances. They would struggle with, the limelight, or they would struggle with, going out and every girl knew who you were because you were on the team. Because again, there's only 53, well, if you count the practice squad, 61 players in that city that play football. So
Yeah, of course.
at a professional level. So again, it's just a lot to deal with. But for me, I was very fortunate. I had my brother to educate me on the process, ahead of time.
So like when you got that first paycheck, that didn't just go straight towards like a new Ferrari or something.
No. I got my I got my signing bonus, and I got my paycheck. I had an account. I actually paid back my agent, who I owed money to for training. I had an apartment, and then at the end of my rookie year, I bought a house because at that time Jacksonville was a great market to buy, and I made pretty good money on my house. That's when I sold it for a couple of years. But no, I
Okay.
put money into a investment account, bank account. Like I was not, hey, give me a Ferrari or a Jag. I wasn't that guy.
Good for you. I mean, that's what I'm always trying to coach my clients is like even when we start to come into that good money, if we can just kind of delay a little bit, delay that gratification just a year or two and bank more money, I think that's always going to reap rewards down the road. So that was certainly smart. And now fast forward and through the NFL, I guess you were about 27 years old when you decided to kind of move on. And then it sounds like you quickly opened up this construction company.
Yeah, I opened a construction company about 6 months after I retired, after feeling sorry for myself and getting addicted to alcohol and nightlife and painkillers because I have been playing football since I was basically 13, 14 years old. Now I'm 27, so for basically the last 13, 14 years of my life, football was not a part of my life anymore. And I actually ended
Wow.
up playing some arena ball and stuff like that just to have fun and kind of, I still wanted to have that teammate camaraderie feeling. Again, that's what I feel most guys will tell you they miss about the National Football League. Do they miss the money? Sure. Everybody loves getting paid big checks. Absolutely. But you miss the guys that you played with. You miss the locker room atmosphere. You miss that camaraderie. You miss that, if you had a bad day at home or a bad evening, you come in, talk to the guys and, sit around the locker room in the nice plush chairs and just conversate and kind of, try to help you push through some difficult times. And that's what a lot of guys miss that I especially
Yeah.
know as you leave the game.
Yeah, I believe it. I've heard that story before, and even with some friends of mine that have been like in the service, they always say, when you come back, that just what you said, that seems to be one of the hardest adjustments to go from having, your boys or your crew that are always there for you to now you're kind of in a totally different life, almost like a life in a shoebox. And I get that. That's got to be a heck of an adjustment, kind of
Oh,
walk into corporate America.
it, it's tough, man, because you're just, and again, this is why so many guys want to go coach or they want to try to get into sportscast because they just want to keep having that feeling. They want to have that camaraderie. So I totally understand when guys do that because it's a natural progression to want to move into.
So when you got right out of the NFL, I mean, were you again, maybe I don't know if your brother was out of the league yet or not, but did you have kind of a role model for what to do now, or were you in like a tough point at that spot?
No, I was in a tough place because when I left the game, my brother was when I retired in '08, my brother had one more year. So he retired at the end of '08. So he was still playing. So I didn't really have anyone. And then my father passed away suddenly about 2 years before that. So it was
Wow.
very hard for me to make that adjustment because I just didn't have anybody. Normally I would have been able to go to my dad and we could have talked things out. Like if my dad was around, I can be very honest and say this, I would have never gone to construction because I didn't know it. But my brother was doing his thing and I didn't want to be a bother to him. And I was trying to find ways to help, make money. And then construction kind of fell right into my lap.
Huh. Yeah, because you had mentioned to me that the NFL, I guess, had a program geared towards like project development and construction. which I found pretty surprising. I don't like, why did they create, I guess, a program in that field? There were a lot of guys, former players getting into that.
Yeah, a lot. Oh, absolutely, Brian. A lot of guys like real estate development because again, what does real estate development give you the opportunity to do if you can build? Big check syndrome, ownership,
Mhm.
property, assets. So yes, a lot of players were in the position of getting into, the field of real estate construction development because of the big check syndrome, and that's honestly why I got into it after hearing about and seeing some of the guys and people that I knew in Baltimore that were doing very well. Again, it's easy to see what people are doing when they're doing well, but you don't see very often when they're struggling.
Yeah, exactly. I like that big check syndrome. I've seen a lot of people with that. And so now when you come out, I guess it was about 6 months, you start this construction company. It looks like you got off to a pretty fast start. So how did you do that? Were you leaning on your network from the NFL, or where did you go to kind of generate all that business?
Well, actually, what happened was I went to an event in downtown Baltimore that was being put on by Congressman Elijah Cummings at Oregon State, and I was able to meet some people. One of my first big clients was a company called Mannequin. Great company, great guys, and their VP and one of their owners were big sports fans. So, of course, they knew me from playing for the Ravens. So I was able to leverage that to my first job, and that's really what I did, Brian. I was very good at the marketing side of the business, getting people to like us, know about us. I went to a lot of networking events, and I was a minority contractor, so there was tons of opportunity because the city and the state was making sure that minorities were getting on jobs and getting taken care of because they wanted to be sure that they were getting an opportunity to do business.
Okay, interesting. So that's pretty cool. And then I guess this just ramped up pretty quickly. And I mean, was your goal there just to make the biggest development company that you possibly could?
I go all day. And that's what led to my demise. I grew too quickly. I tell people all the time when I speak to entrepreneurs, growing controlled, good growth, awesome. Growing rapidly, too fast can cause catastrophe all day. And that's what
Wow.
happened to me is I got into a business that you need to have heavy cash, which I did, but I got onto a project where all that heavy cash was spent on rectifying an issue. When I got time to go get paid back my change order, it was denied, and that is how I had to close my business, and I had to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
Wow. So what led to that? I mean, was that just like one big deal that blew up, or was this kind of like a slow work in progress where things started to go south for you?
Well, things went south for me as I got very arrogant, very complacent, Mr. Know-it-all, and a lot of my best employees started leaving in the summer of 2012. But it really came to a much expedited, process between I'll say like between August and September of 2012 to about December when I spent close to $3 million in that time frame because I was paying out our, all of our stuff like our employees, our salaries. I was paying out different things as far as the materials needed, trucks, all this stuff sunk.
Yeah.
So all that stuff was getting paid out. And so basically by December of that year, 2012, I looked in the bank account. There was pretty much like what $3,000 left. That was it. My line was tapped out, and then I remember it was like right around the Christmas time. We were hoping that the bank would extend our line from 1.5 or from 1 million to 1.5 or 2 to carry us, and they denied it. And so basically that Christmas, when I went with my fiance and my wife down
Hmm.
for that, I knew when I got back home that unless we were going to get bought out by somebody who was close to doing it because they saw the big picture, but we didn't tell them something that we should have. Well, my partner didn't. I wanted to, but he didn't want to. That doesn't really make a difference. And they pulled out of the deal. that middle of January. Then after that, I knew it was over. And so basically February, we started getting things in line. And then by March, basically, I knew we were done. And then April 15th of 2013, I had left, kind of like the old Browns left, left in the middle of the night. I left. And I got in the car and I drove down to Carolina because I knew if I stayed in Baltimore, Brian, it would just be too much to deal with.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a story. That's unbelievable. And it's crazy. I mean, that's the same thing, I guess, with every business. It's all about that cash flow. And once you have that shortage in any month, that's where, things can start to unravel. So would you say,
absolutely.
did you feel like at that point that you were being, any financially irresponsible, or this was just kind of a factor of the business, maybe not having the business savvy to do what you had to do?
Well, no, I wasn't spending money irresponsibly because it was all going to the business. But what I did do irresponsibly was trust a client on a handshake deal that I shouldn't have. And that was my big mistake, is I should have sat down, no matter how much they were rushing me, pushing me, I should have sat my butt down and got signed change orders for all that work. But I didn't do it because I trusted them, and that was my irresponsible mistake.
Wow.
That's what happened to me.
And then did you want to, like, when you got out of Baltimore, understandably, like, were you looking to just kind of restart in a new location, or you were just had enough and you were out of that line of work?
Well, no, I knew I wanted out of construction because I didn't want to. Construction was never my passion. I just did it to make money. And when we moved to Raleigh, the Raleigh area, my wife's family was here, so that was why we chose this location. But when I got here, the NFL was in helping me because they knew what was going on, because I told them everything. They helped me get a job with Merrill Lynch, and that's when I ended up getting a position at Merrill Lynch in Durham when I first got down here. But the problem was I missed the pay cycle, and by the time I got down here with moving and everything else that took me to get from Baltimore to Carolina, we had like $500 in the bank, and I was about a week away from being homeless because I didn't have enough money to pay next month's rent. And like the lease said, if you don't pay rent within the first 6 months on time, that they could throw you out within 24 hours, no, without any recourse. They can get the sheriff to do that. And I had to sign that because we had no other options. Like, we had no money, we had no credit.
Jeez.
I mean, everything I had, Brian, was gone. My house was taken from us, the cars were taken from us. Everything that I had worked for my whole life, football-wise, business-wise, was taken from me and gone within 90 days. And that's where, when I got here, I was about a week away from being homeless because I knew I couldn't afford the rent for May of 2013.
And how old were you at this point?
2013, I was 32.
Wow, that's crazy to think, in just a decade, how much occurred there. Be in the NFL and then, have this rock star business, and then you're on the brink of being homeless. So
Yep.
what do you do at that point? I know that you mentioned it in your book, that you had some kind of dark periods. Was that right after the NFL, when you started, having a little too much alcohol and stuff, or was that at this point? Was there any kind of sense of depression, or like, tell me emotionally, like, what was going on there?
Oh yeah, after the NFL was depression because I had lost, I wasn't going to be able to play football anymore. But then the real clinical big deep depression of failure and anxiety and being broke. After the NFL, when I left the NFL, I wasn't broke. So I was just in a state of depressed because I knew that football was over. But I had money. When I lost Caden, it was depression, anxiety, fear, et cetera, because I lost my business. Football was not an option, and I had no money.
Wow, that's crazy. And Caden, the construction company that we were just talking about.
Correct. Yep, that's correct.
And then you also mentioned you started getting into a little bit of gambling as well. Like, was that back when you had the money from the playing days? Or okay, gotcha.
So, yeah.
That rush, I guess.
Yeah, there was no gambling after. There was no gambling after the business was gone.
There was no money to gamble.
The gambling was after the NFL when I had money and time on my hands, and I was not used to not having a job to go to.
So, I mean, those are two monster transitions. It's like you retired at 27 and then have another career, and then that goes bankrupt at 32. So now, was there like a pivotal moment that kind of got you? I mean, I don't want to say out of the gutter, but from being down and out like you were there.
Yeah, well, the pivotal moment for me was, I took a job when I got down here. I was working for Merrill Lynch for a couple months, and I got fired because I was not doing what I needed to do on my practice test, and I couldn't focus because I just had a lot of things going on. So I don't blame it at all. That's totally my fault. Got a job the next day with a construction business. Was fired 5 days later, so I was fired 2 times in a week. And so I started coaching football to the youth, and then I picked up a job as a janitor, making $8.25 an hour on the graveyard shift. Worked from 10 p.m. to like pretty much 10 p.m. to about 4 or 5 a.m. And my pivotal moment was when I was a janitor, and I was taking someone's trash out, and the trash ripped, and it got on my bare skin. I tell people all the time, being a janitor, I respected that. I mean, I did not beat myself up for that, because being a janitor, it's an honest living. Like, people are doing things to take care of their family, and I respect and I support that. So anyone that does that gets my respect. So that wasn't my low point. Like, I was glad to have a job. The
Sure.
low point was that trash getting on me, and then we just realizing, man, I'm sitting here and I have people's trash on my head. And if I don't wake up and start blaming everybody else for Caden's failure and saying it was my business partner's fault, the contractor's fault, if I don't stop blaming other people, the rest of my life will be spent right here, always blaming somebody else. And that's when I turned my life around.
Wow. I believe it. And it's funny, not to digress too much, but when I was in college, I was bouncing at a club here in Jersey. And at the end of the night, once we closed everything down, all the bouncers had to take out all the trash. And we used to call it garbage juice because there was so much, the booze in every trash bag that as we're dragging that out towards the dumpsters, it's like leaking all over us. And it was disgusting. And it was true. You kind of think about it in those moments like, all right, I know I'm doing this right now, but I've got to find something, some way to kind of move on to the next phase.
Right. And that's what it was for me, because I had been in the NFL, I had run businesses, I had made money, I had done notable things in my life. How did I end up here? I knew I ended up here because I stopped being accountable for my actions. And when I started blaming other people for my failures, that's when my life ended up in a bad place.
So now was it at this point that you reach out through the Gene Upshaw program and start to get into, doing some speaking and coaching and things of that nature? Or what led you from kind of janitor to here?
So honestly, I came home that morning and I wrote down my goals, and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start doing speaking to help athletes not make the same mistakes that I did. And then I started there, and then it just grew and grew, and it took me 2.5 years to get my first paid job. But once I got it, I was able to learn how to leverage into more jobs. And then I went from being a motivational speaker to an inspirational speaker. And from being an inspirational speaker to being an inspirational speaker who could give action steps and real knowledge and real value propositions that people could write down and could put into their own life. And then that's when I started to get booked a lot more consistently.
Got it. And then tell us a little bit about your book, because I guess it was around this time you wrote your first book, which was Sleepless Nights. What was kind of the genesis of that? How did that all come about?
That book actually came about because, during the time I was going through everything, that was 2014 when I started the book. I still was trying to figure everything out. I was still trying to speak and coach. I was no way in any good financial shape or mental shape, but I was trying to get my thoughts out on paper, and we had a publishing company that we met through LinkedIn that approached us, and then we were going to write the book. And really what that book was about was just to show people about my life, because I wasn't getting anywhere as far as paid jobs. So I was hoping that by doing that, I could start to leverage the book for paid opportunities, and that's kind of what happened. But it took a few months before I actually, got paid on a paid job, because that book came out October of 2015. I didn't get my first paid job until April of 2016.
Okay. Did you find, out of curiosity, did you find it actually writing and composing that whole book? Did you find that like therapeutic at all?
Somewhat talking it out, yes, it helped a lot. Helped out a lot, talk things out, and realize where I made mistakes. And what it really made me do is realize that everything in life falls back to how do you handle it. You know what I mean? If you make a mistake and you do something incorrect, how do you handle it? And that's kind of what I had to learn, through the whole process of, my first book coming out is, yeah, I made some mistakes, and you can't blame other people for what you did wrong.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's a great message right there. That's pretty cool. And then you end up transitioning into the next book, which I would guess was going more from what you wrote. And the reason I ask you about kind of it feeling therapeutic is I almost noticed that too. Like as you put words down on paper, it's like you find out more about yourself. And even when I wrote my book, there were several times where I kind of had to take a moment, take a pause, and it just kind of like reveals everything that you are inside. So I always thought that was kind of unique. But then you transition over into another book, The Success Cycle, and that sounds to be
Hmm.
more of kind of the game plan of how to go from A to B. And
That is
what are
correct.
some of kind of
That's
the
correct.
key things there? I guess if somebody in a quick minute wants to know, hey, what's that all about? What would you say?
I would say that this book talks about three main things you need to have to be successful. Number one is ambition. What do you want out of life? What goals? What vision? What is your ambition? Drive. Drive's about the inner force you need to have to achieve success, which talks about, making sure that you know where you are and have the inner force to get to where you want to be when people tell you you're crazy, you're making a mistake. And then hard work. Focus on you, not the competition. So many people, Brian, want to say, well, they're doing this and they're doing that. Well, that's great. That's them. Focus on you. Don't worry about the competition. So the success cycle talks about these three things in that order. Define your ambition, identify and find your drive, and be ready to work your butt off and not focus on the competition. Focus on what you can control. You can control.
Got it. Got it. And now, what would you say to like a former athlete that says, "Hey, Marcus, I got the drive. I was playing at the highest level of competition. I know how to work hard. That's what got me here." But what if they have that feeling going back to step one of ambition of, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want to do now. Like I feel like I lost my first love of that sport or whatever it may have been. Where do they find that? Do you ever run into that?
Sure. And I tell them all the time, go back to the beginning. What do you enjoy? If you love football that much, get into coaching. Do you like technology? Do you like art? Do you like music? Whatever you like, start there and then build. Like for me, I enjoyed speaking. I just didn't know how to create a business out of it. So
Yeah.
now what I do is I call it the Tony Robbins model. I love his work. Is I built my brand off of speaking. I now have coaching. I now have consulting. I now have a book. I have two books. I now do appearances. I'm a brand ambassador. I own equity in several different businesses where I've leveraged my ability as a speaker to help get more exposure. So I tell athletes, and I work with tons of athletes as a coach, guys, go back to the beginning and start there.
Yep. Yeah. Take it all the way back to basics. Interesting.
Correct.
That's pretty cool. And then speaking of coaching, I know you do a lot of business coaching, obviously, but do you actually coach anymore with like the youth or with football?
Yeah, I do football coaching on the weekend. I coach here in Raleigh on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings, 2 hours a week, working with kids. Some of them are, guys who I've been working with since their freshman year, now getting ready to go into their junior, senior year of high school. I have kids that are in college. I have a couple kids I work with that are in the National Football League. So yeah, I still do coach, and I love it and I enjoy it. And I'm all about giving the knowledge, because what these young athletes need, I don't care if you're a professional player or you are a high school player, you're still young. You need that
Yep.
guidance, because here's what happens when you start making mistakes and things happen and you're having trouble. everybody wants to beat you down.
Sure.
And now it's good to have them have someone who has the ability, right, to help them understand that, hey, man, I don't want anything from you. I'm just trying to help you get from A to B, and this is how
Sure.
you should go about it. That's it.
How do you feel, out of curiosity, with like all this stuff you hear anytime you hear NFL, it's like synonymous with concussions and everything else. Like, what do you think kids getting involved? Do you have any hesitation about that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I only get worried if kids are not being properly coached. If you're getting
Okay.
properly coached, I think the game is great. But again, is there risk in football? Sure there is. But there's risk in walking down the street. So it's
Yeah.
risk in you getting on the airplane. I mean, everything, there's risk. So you have to assess the risk. And I tell people all the time, if you're being coached properly, then the risk gets mitigated. So I just want kids who are playing to be properly coached, so they don't run into these issues where their head's down or they don't know how to tackle somebody, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, and they're just running around like madmen, getting hurt. Got it.
Right.
That's a good point. So one last thing too that I want to touch on, because obviously this show, the Caderna podcast, is kind of business, but also finance and personal finance. Is there anything you would tell, young folks that are, getting into athletics, even professional sports, money wise? Obviously they come into a lot of money quick, and you were pretty responsible, obviously. What would you tell these guys to do with their money when they come into so much money for such a usually short period of time?
I would tell guys that the money does not keep coming. Whatever you make, live the bare minimum and put the rest away. Don't get into anything high risk. And if you do something that's high risk, consult your advisor, consult your team, have conversations, have dialogue. You don't need to put if you have a $10 million, if you got $10 million after taxes, right? If you could let's say you pick up conservative 5%, conservative 5% on your investments annual, it's $500,000. If you can't live off $500,000, and you already own your house, and you have everything you need, then what is the problem? What happens to guys? And again, like me, I had good money coming out. I had good money coming out. I got into a business that I didn't realize until I got too far deep into it, the real risk of it. Like, that's what I'm saying. If my father was alive, I would have never got into construction on that realm. So This is why I tell people, when you make money, put it to the side, live like you have some sense, and then build your assets. So when you leave the game, you're not in a position where you have to go and do something you don't want to do because you've blown through your money.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think you see that a lot. I mean, obviously, professional athletes are a prime target for a lot of different, I wouldn't say scams, but 1,000 different ideas out there. And you've heard so many stories of folks that, they open up their restaurant or their bar or this or that. And before you know it, in a couple of years, that's out of business, and now they've lost so much of what they earned. So I think, that old saying, you got to invest what you know.
And I know way too many guys that happen to.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? I'm almost like, that's unfortunate, but that's better than the total opposite side of the guys that just blow it all. I mean,
True,
Mike Tysons of the world, where $300 million just evaporated, in a few years.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. He hits my actually buy him a Maserati or a Bentley. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so lastly, I mean, this has been quite a roller coaster, and it sounds like the story is really on the right track now, which is awesome. But what inspires you right now? I mean, are you a man of faith, or is there something that gets you up every single morning going? And what's kind of next on the agenda for Marques Ogden?
Absolutely, I'm a man of faith. Without faith, I wouldn't be here today. That's for sure. And what gets me going really is getting up every morning and creating value for my clients, either through speaking, coaching, consulting, helping them raise capital for their real estate businesses that are good, sound structures, or companies that I work with called Athlete Foundry, which I'm a brand ambassador for, which is trying to help kids who struggle with getting recruited, bringing recruiting to their front door. That's all I'm about, is every single day waking up and providing value to people that I interact with. That's what gets me up. That's what gets me excited. And that's why I've been very fortunate to grow a business where before I was worried about the transaction, whereas today I'm worried about the value that I bring to people, and the transactions will come.
Definitely, definitely. That's awesome. All right, so I know we're just about out of time here, so we're going to go into our quick lightning round. This will be just a few fast-paced questions that we always have fun with for the last minute or two here. So if you
Hmm.
don't mind, we could hop right into it. All right.
Sure.
All right, so here we go. What is your favorite book?
Act Like a Success, Think Like a Success by Steve Harvey.
Got it. And your hero growing up?
My father.
Who was the best coach you ever had?
Oh, good Lord, Jack Del Rio.
Jack Del Rio. Okay. And your favorite movie?
Ooh, that's a tough one, man. I would have to go with Scarface.
Scarface. Okay, that's a classic. And this is a good one for you. I mean, you used to be a 300 pounder. Your favorite food?
Chinese food.
Chinese food. Okay. How
Hmm.
many hours do you sleep every night?
Probably about maybe six.
Okay. And who was the best defensive lineman or maybe the best pass rusher that you ever played against?
Oh God. Kevin Williams from Minnesota.
Kevin Williams. All right. And
Hmm.
if you could have one quote or mantra that would define your life you carry around with you, what would it be?
One is huh, when you have to believe it before you can see it, which means that if you don't believe in your vision or what you're trying to do, you won't ever see it. So you have to believe it before you can see it.
You have to believe it before you can see it. I like that. And who wins, Superman or Batman?
Superman.
Superman. Okay. And last up, what was the favorite vacation or destination you've ever been to?
My wife and I went to Cabo.
Say that again?
Cabo.
Cabo. Okay. Yeah, that's where Zeke is
Hmm.
always training now. Great training ground.
Yeah. Yep. Cabo was our spot.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Marcus. Do you have any parting words or anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
No, just remember this. It's in life. The only way you can achieve success, in my opinion, is the team around you. I don't care how good you are at your job, you can't do everything. So be sure to bring the right team around you, and you can have the success you desire.
And I'd like to just piggyback on that with a quote that I think really encapsulates a lot of what you've said today by sticking with the football theme. Roger Staubach, so a quarterback on one of my favorite teams, the Cowboys. And Roger Staubach, who also got into business and real estate and made way more money in real estate than he actually did as a Hall of Fame quarterback. And he
Way more.
famously said, yeah, way more. Roger Staubach said it takes a lot of unspectacular preparation to have spectacular results in both football and business.
I
So
agree.
love that quote there. And I really want to thank you again, Marcus, for being on the show. This has been another episode of the Caderna podcast. I'm your host, Brian Caderna. And thanks for taking some time for us this morning.
No problem, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
All righty. And all our listeners out there, please keep on tuning in, spreading the good word, and we'll be sure to see you next week. Take care. The Caderna podcast is for informational purposes only. Individual situations may vary, and the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Brian Caderna does not provide tax or legal advice. Listeners should contact their own tax or legal advisors in this matter. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. Brian Caderna is a registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS, 300 Broadacres Drive, Suite 175, Bloomfield, New Jersey, 07003. Securities products and services and advisory services are offered through PAS, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, 973-244-4420. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is an indirect, wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Caderna Financial Team and International Planning Alliance, LLC are not affiliates or subsidiaries of PAS or Guardian. Caderna Financial Team is a division of International Planning Alliance, LLC, a general agency of the Guardian. PAS is a member of FINRA SIPC, California Insurance License Number OK04194.